Hello, Maria Jordan O'Reilly here with some nice watercolour doodles for springtime. I prepared the paper by just taping it down with some masking tape onto one of my painting boards, making little squares to work within. And I'm using 4 basic colours for these little doodles. So I've just filled a square with each of the colours I'm using. So there's a magenta pink, a nice green, sap green, bright yellow and a blue. So having just filled a square with each colour, I am now distributing colours into the other squares. So there's no pattern to this, it's just doodling with paint. The only rule I set myself for these is that each square will have some of each colour within it, and that I try to make sure the shapes I paint into each square are different, that there's a little bit of variety. So I worked through the colours there and just whatever tickles my fancy and it goes. I do like this time of year, bright and fresh, lovely spring colours, and that's what inspired me to pick up the watercolours and play around a little bit. It's a nice way to get back in touch with your creativity too. There's no real plan, you just set out your grid and play around. It's a really good idea to set yourself a colour palette for something like this, so that there's a colour theme running through each little square as you finish them. So I decided to pull the tape off here. I wouldn't always do it, but you can. But if you notice, just to the bottom right of the green square, or the pink square, some of the green paint had seeped in, so I thought it was as well to take the tape off before it ran and seeped through onto the paper. It's interesting when you pull the tape to see just your little squares now of wee shapes and patterns. So I just need to check that some of the paint has dried so that I can take up my wee pen and start to doodle. It's a little Uniball pen with a very fine tip. The Uniball is good, the black, because generally speaking it doesn't bleed into your watercolour. So I've started to doodle now. It wasn't until I looked at the video I realised the camera was slightly off, so you can't see the very bottom of my doodles. So I put a wee picture of the finished doodle in the top right there so you can see. Again, it's just really playing around with lines and dots and wee shapes, just whatever comes to mind. There was absolutely no plan when I started making these, no rules. So you can doodle whatever you like. We don't have to be able to draw. You can just use little circles and dots, shapes and lines. And each wee box in the grid gives you an opportunity to have a look at the shapes and the colours and consider what you might like to add in there. Just play around and have some fun. This isn't about creating anything perfect. It's just about enjoying the colour and the meditative aspect of being creative. I've sped this video up because the whole process took about an hour and a quarter from beginning to end. So I thought it was quite long enough at 16 minutes to sit through. And yet there's enough detail in it if it's something you would like to try for yourself. Again, I'm just looking at the shapes, figuring out what doodle might fit within each, adding wee dots. And as you add the ink, it tends to make the colours look more vibrant. Adding little curves here, makes the painted shape look more curved. But it's just having a little bit of fun. When I started painting these, the blue, that lovely vibrant blue, really caught my eye. And it reminded me of a poem I learned in school many, many years ago by Gerard Manley Hopkins called Spring. And it still echoes in my head. Nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeds in wheels shoot long and lovely and lush. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens, and thrush through the echoing timber does so rinse and ring the ear, it strikes like lightnings to hear him sing. The glassy pear tree leaves and blooms, they brush the descending blue. That blue is all in a rush with richness. The racing lambs too have fared their fling. I think Mr. Hopkins paints a wonderful picture with his words. I find the visual art to be very expressive, but that blue just brought the echo of those words. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens. And isn't it wonderful to be out and about now on our restricted walks, even within 5k. I'm extremely lucky to be here in Cavan, where I can slip out my door because I'm in the middle of nowhere and walk down a country lane and just take in some fresh air and some nice scenery. And I usually take my phone with me, even if I don't take the camera. And yesterday saw just a little flash of red in the hedgerow and looked over, and it's the first wee ladybird I've seen this year, and that kind of brought a smile to my face. Okay, enough waxing lyrical here. So you may have noticed some of the shapes I'm outlining in black and some I'm not. Again, as I look on each wee square, I kind of go, what will I do with this? That yellow shape reminded me a little bit of an Easter egg. So you can see where the lines kind of took that. And then sometimes just echoing the shape that's there and then adding extra colour or lines or dots around. And it just seems to lift the simplicity of the painted shape. And you can see how a little ink work on watercolour can really make a difference. I decided with this one, instead of leaving the background blank, to play around with some dots. Again, all decisions made on the spur of the moment, just what I felt like doing to fill in the gaps at the back. This is a lovely way to kind of sit and be creative and meditative and just relax and let it go. You know, there's no right, there's no wrong, it's just enjoying what you're doing, playing around with shapes, colour, paint, a little bit of ink. So here we move on to the next one. Again, I've shown you the finished doodle on the top right there, so you can kind of see from where it started to where it ended up. And again, just organically going along. And what will I do here? Oh, I'll put lines in there or circles in that, and maybe I should add a little piece to the other. That's all just part of the creative process. Taking time just to have a peek and say, yeah, I'd like to add a little embellishment to the edge of that, and then work on with the others. Sometimes I just trace lines around the shape, kind of echoing the shape that's there. In this case, I decided to continue them on behind the main shapes. And it just adds a kind of a texture to the ink and to what you're doing. I've almost obliterated the yellow in that. That lovely yellow reminds me of the dandelions popping up in the garden, and hopefully of the bees as they make their way back to us after the winter. So all of these colours kind of remind me of springtime here in Cavan. The deep pink is echoes a wee pink flower that runs riot out in my garden. It was there before I came, and it just tumbles through and across the ground and almost wild and pops up these bright pink little star-shaped flowers. I think that's why when I started working on the pink square, the first thing came to mind was a wee flower. And again, I'm just doodling and sketching. You don't have to draw flowers, you can draw shapes. Just basic triangles and squares and circles, whatever you feel like adding in. But this called to me for some floral shapes. It's just so nice to relax and do that. It probably doesn't look relaxed with the sped up video, but I actually did just take my time and enjoy the doodles. And it seems far less daunting to take a little square with some colour in it and play around with a pen and doodle. You don't feel like this is a big piece that you're afraid you're going to ruin. You can look on each wee square as just a little individual piece of art and see what comes to mind. I know some people who work making cards who would doodle and play around with wash and ink like this, and then cut the pieces up and use them as part of their greeting cards, just as little colourful pieces. I'm just looking at that now actually, and I'm thinking about a friend of mine here in Cavan who will be moving home shortly, and I'm thinking of a grid like that with little wee houses in it with ink and wash would be a very nice little project. So that might be something on the cards in the next few days. I've been working on little line and wash watercolours of the businesses in my local town, which is Baileyborough. They're great fun. And I've been playing around a lot with watercolour combined with other mediums. Some of a few different series of works kind of in progress at the moment. I'm enjoying the local buildings, and they seem to make people smile each time I pop another one up. Also, I've been looking at the wonderful megalithic carvings in Loughcrew, which, while it's not in Cavan, is not that far from my front door. And I've been doing a few pieces around that. I just find it fascinating that art and creativity has been around us for so very long, and we are still fascinated by what was left to us by our ancestors. So that wee series is called Secrets in the Stones, because we all look at those shapes and we wonder, is there a meaning behind them? And if there is, what is it? And is it connected to like a big solar or lunar calendar, or like, is there more to it than that as a telling a story? I suppose we'll never be definitely sure of what the intention of the artists were, but we can enjoy the work. And it's wonderful to look back and think that while the artist may have been forgotten, their work lives on and is still enjoyed by so many people. Can't wait till the restrictions lift so I can take a trip over to Loughcrew and take a walk up to have a look at the mounds and the stones again, instead of just going back and looking at photographs that I had taken there before. I suppose in one way that's a drawback of current restrictions, that you can't go out to the locations. It wouldn't even be a good idea to sit in town to sketch and draw and paint, because that usually attracts attention and people gather around to see what you're doing. So At the minute I'm just taking myself down to the town early in the mornings with my camera and taking reference photos, and then coming home and taking my time and working away on different buildings. I like this one. A bit like worms and slugs squirming, but they're bright and colourful and cheerful. And again, all very simple shapes just to embellish the paintwork, as you can see. Simple little dots and lines. This one I kept really simple. Short little lines and a few wee dots. And I do like it. So that's the watercolour doodles for spring. A whole entire sheet of them, as you can see in the top right there. Lovely and bright and colourful. Most enjoyable hour and a half spent creating them. Hope it inspires you to do something similar yourself. Do subscribe and hit that notification bell if you'd like to see more.